here. We're here to remember Leo Gotch. A few logistics before we start. If you haven't found them yet and you need them, bodies are an important gift. The bathrooms are immediately outside the back here, right to your right. Also, if you haven't seen it, there's going to be food available after the service. And during that time, those of you who wish will be able to share stories of Leo. We'll have a microphone so we can all hear those stories. But now, I invite you to enter into a spirit of honoring and remembering Leo. It is not every 105-year-old who has this many people gathered in a room for them. Just in case you needed to be reminded how special Leo was. I'm going to start our service with a reading of Psalm 23. After I introduce myself. Apologies. My name is Nada Velimirovich. Whenever I introduce myself, I always have to explain my name. Let me do that briefly. Nada, yes, is spelled N-A-D-A. If you know Spanish, you might know it means nothing. I am a hospice chaplain. I like to reframe language and words. In my father's language, Nada means hope. So now you've learned some Serbian. So with my work, I try to bring nothing but hope. There we go. End of my spiel. Now we will hear Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Now, in honor of Leo, I will sing Amazing Grace. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I have time of stories shared first by Nora.
Hi everybody, my name is Nora and I'm videotaping myself in Maple Ridge, British Columbia, and I have to read this because I'll never remember all of that. It's my Uncle Leo, my great Uncle Leo, was born on December the 13th, 2017 in Revelstoke, BC. He was the 9th and youngest by a good decade child of Paulina and Mike Ormatus Gaunt. He was only 12 when my mom was born, and his eldest niece was only 5 years younger than he was. Leo, or Uncle Leo as we all call him, had an amazing life, and although he lived in California most of his adult life, he stayed in contact with all his relatives, including his Canadian family. He is survived by over 100 of us in BC, Ontario, California, New Mexico, and Nevada. We are a huge family, and Uncle Leo remembered us all by name, right from his nieces and nephews to his great nieces and nephews, and his double and triple great nieces and nephews. During the years when he still traveled, and he traveled a lot, Uncle Leo spent a great deal of time visiting us in British Columbia, his favorite part of Canada. He stayed with us when he traveled to the Lower Mainland in BC, and we all remember his gifts of playing cards from the casinos, hotel soaps, and the zillions of notepads that he would bring to us. He also liked to give us clothes that he didn't like anymore. Kind of funny though, is Uncle Leo was a very big man, and most of the men in the family were a ton smaller. He loved traveling up the West Coast and up the Fraser Canyon, and made several driving and cruise ship trips to Alaska. He was a hiker, a history buff, and could talk for hours about big mines in northern BC and about steam trains. If you knew something he didn't, his interest was real and accompanied by a boisterous son of a gun. No kidding. His dream was to buy a piece of property off the side of the road by Boston Bar. I have no idea why. His other favorite spot in BC was, of course, his hometown of Revelstoke. And when he was still able to drive, he would head over to Revelstoke and spend several days visiting old haunts and family. He had many Dean stories. I'm not sure why he has so many Dean stories. He loved Steveston and the docks, and made a point of connecting with all of his nieces and nephews when he hit the mainland. In later years, when driving himself wasn't an option, he would fly, and one of us would pick him up at Vancouver International Airport, except for one momentous trip, when he opted to try out the new SkyTrain station, and it took us a while to find him in Vancouver, because he went from Richmond to Vancouver, and we were all out in the valley. He loved his walks, enjoyed kids, loved wildlife, loved splashing around in the rivers and streams, and his two favorite things to eat were blueberries and polenta. We think Auntie Celine got him hooked on polenta. Places he traveled to included Boston Bar and Revelstoke, of course, the Grand Canyon, Pitt Lake, Hawaii, Alaska, and he would sometimes take the ferry to Ketchikan and sleep on the deck. Freeport, Europe, Dante's View in Death Valley, and anywhere else anybody was traveling to. I have to say that one of his favorite traveling partners was his nephew Wayne, who sadly passed away several years ago. Uncle Leo's love of his life was Celine and their beautiful and welcoming home in Walnut Creek. Uncle Leo struggled deeply following her death. Most of us have many stories to share about Uncle Leo, but I think that one of the most memorable recent stories is when he was introduced to FaceTime by one of the caregivers this past Christmas. No kidding! And son of a gun, and he was told he could talk to us face to face. Yes, he has the same color hair as Uncle Leo. Yes, and that's another funny thing about Uncle Leo is his hair. His hair always looked like that. We who spoke to him regularly will miss him a lot. I wish we could be with all of his friends for a celebration of his life, as his life was truly amazing. Thank you to Nancy for being such a good adopted niece and helping him with his day-to-day affairs.
Working? Okay. I'm Nancy, and I know I've talked to probably each of you. I might not remember all the faces, but yeah, it's been a lot of work, but such a joy to talk to all the friends, the local people, the Canada relatives, a lot of whom wanted to be here, but you know, just wasn't possible. Leo and his wife Celine, my granddaughter Parker. Leo and his wife Celine were married in 1957 and were friends with my mom and dad. My mom, Charmaine, is here with us today. My mom worked with Celine and the two couples became friends. I was born in 1960, so Leo has been a family friend for my whole life. One of the pictures on display is of my father and Leo and two young children. One is me, the younger one, and the other one is my sister Sue, who's also here. My early memories of Celine and Leo were basic childhood memories. We went to their house in Orinda in Walnut Creek, or they would come to visit us in our house in Walnut Creek. All my siblings recall Leo calling often with his usual greeting, "Daddy home?" Because I want to talk to my dad. When I got married in 1982, Leo and Celine attended our wedding, which was at our home in Walnut Creek. Leo had just retired, was looking forward to retirement life. 1982, wow, that was a while back. My dad was retired, and from what I understood, he and Leo had plans to hang out. At the time, Celine was battling breast cancer, and sadly she passed away in August of that year. As well, my father passed away later in November of that year. Leo had a hard time with these losses, but eventually was able to carry on like we all must when we lose someone special. For many years, he traveled the globe. I've seen pictures and postcards of his from many countries. He was not afraid to travel solo and never let that stop him. He visited family in Canada frequently. I'm telling you, if you ever mention the city, state, or even country that you were going to visit, chances are he's been there. And not only that, but he would have recommendations as to what to do there, where to eat, everything. I admired his adventurous spirit and curiosity in the world and in life, up until just, recently. He truly cared about people in his life as well. I've got to know several of Leo's circle of family and friends, and there is a truly common theme that he called often, he kept in touch, and asked you about your family and how life was treating you. And these calls were not long. It wasn't one of those where you look at the phone and say, it's Leo. It was, he just was touching and reaching out. Later in life, Leo asked me to help him with some estate planning, and as the time went on, I became more and more involved in his life. I'd take him to all his doctor's appointments, sit with him in the ER if needed, interpret what the doctors were saying. I also took on more of a role of handling his finances and helping him find new housing when needed. Many thanks to Lloyd's Senior Care Home. You're here, yay. Lilia, Conrado, Jerry, Irene, and Jamal were all such great caregivers. I remember the day I met them. Conrado said to me that when people move into their home, they start out as a client and end up as family, and they truly did their best to make Leo feel comfortable and at home. This was despite the fact that Leo was always trying to tell Lilia how to cook and where to buy things. Also, many thanks to the people from Suncrest Hospice. Every one of them that I met were very caring and gentle with Leo. They listened to his worries about aches and pains patiently and did their best to make him comfortable. Special thanks to Nada. Leo lit up when you entered the room. He looked forward to your bright energy and connection to God that you provided. Thank you to Jane, my other sister. She made all these beautiful flower arrangements for Leo. Leo was close with all of us in the family. And also all of the family members that have supported me through this journey with Leo, especially my husband Dennis, who's the fix-it side of the family, so any little fix-it things Leo ever needed. Over the years, Leo has become a dear person to me and a big responsibility. I did my best to help him not to worry, feel comfortable and cared for in his last several years. I will miss him, and I know you will too, but what a blessing to have known such a special person. I now have something. I was going to, Merle Eaton is a friend of Leo's that was going to be here and speak, but he couldn't make it, so I wanted to read. He wrote some great stuff, and I just wanted to pass that on to you. Okay, this is Merle talking. I started visiting Leo in 2015 as part of my duties in CPC, which is a church, Friendship Caller Program. For some unknown reason, after a couple of years, he was taken off the rolls of the program, and I was told that I no longer needed to visit him. Because of what our relationship had become, I couldn't stop and continued on my own. He began as an assignment for me and became a true friend. Leo is a truly remarkable man, and I feel blessed to have been able to get to know him as well as I did. I don't think that I ever have known a man who was more considerate of others and had such a thirst for knowledge with such a wide variety of interests as Leo. He possessed an amazing memory even during his last years. He memorized my home phone number and often called and left caring and encouraging messages on my answering machine. I brought my youngest son with me during one of my visits and my wife with me on another occasion. He always asked about them by name even years later. I always came away from our visits with a smile. When he was still in Rossmore, I used to take him shopping occasionally for groceries at a store on North Main Street in Walnut Creek, which is Sprouts. It was always an adventure. I always thought that my wife was particular about picking out her produce, but she couldn't hold a candle to Leo. Leo had some very definite ideas about nutrition, and he was not shy about sharing them. Right, Lilia? As a matter of fact, I never found him to be shy about sharing anything. We would often stand in front of the fresh fruit section for what seemed like an hour as he carefully examined each and every plum or peach, looking for the ideal specimen. Then I'm sure he gained his training for his motorized scooter career, pushing those grocery carts. It was all I could do to keep up or stay out of his way. I will never forget the time just after he moved into Atria when he convinced me that it was no big deal for him to ride down to the bank several blocks away on his motorized scooter. He assured me that he did this all the time, on his own, mind you. He assured me that he did this all the time and needed money, so he asked me to walk alongside with him to the bank. I was a little nervous, but in a weak moment agreed. The trip down to the bank went without incident, and I started to relax as we made our way back up the hill toward Atria. You may recall that he drove that scooter as though he had a career in NASCAR. I don't think that I ever visited him when he was still using the scooter that he didn't show up with new bumps, bruises, and bandages. Anyway, as we proceeded back up the hill, Leo managed to drive partially off the sidewalk into a planted area that was next to it. I've had this happen with him too. The right-hand wheels of the scooter sunk into the soil. We ended up with Leo hanging on for dear life at a 45-degree angle, and me struggling alongside to keep all of us upright. Merle's not a young man, so. We must have been quite a sight, as you may remember that scooter was quite heavy. I thought that we were going to need a tow truck. Cars were driving by, and for some unknown reason, some even honked their horns. Not only did I have concerns for Leo's well-being, but for my own as well. The term elder abuse popped into my mind. Somehow we were able to right the ship and get back to Atria safely, but not before I surreptitiously managed to clean the mud and clinging vines off the scooter. Needless to say, I was very careful in the future about my activities with Leo. I'm sure that Leo has given to many others what he has given to me, lifelong memories that will forever evoke warm smiles and gratitude.
John, your turn. Get to hear from John now. Your turn.
My name is John Tong, and probably I was one of the last ones to get acquainted with Leo, which happened to be in 2013, so that's not too far away, actually 10 years. I'm a member of Community Presbyterian Church in Danville, and that's where I met Leo. At that point in time, there was a let's get acquainted type of thing. So there would be a hesitation in what was going to be presented later on, and just say, hey, turn around and shake a hand with a person that you don't know. Well, Leo was a person that I didn't know. So I went over and shook hands with him and started talking to him. And come to find out that Leo was hard of hearing and couldn't see all that well. So the fact that there was singing that was going on, Leo didn't know what was being sung, but he was there. And what indicated that to me was that he really wanted the blessing of the Father. And that's what Leo got, because what I happened to do with him later on was we would go around to other places in this area, and I kind of found out that he is so knowledgeable about everything. And he knows exactly not only what it is, but what happened to it and how it happened and all of those things. So he was quite a person who was able to give a lot of information back to you. And I appreciated that, because we've only lived here since 76, so no, that's not. In any event, I know there's going to be a lot of things that will be shared with you today, and I want to be fairly brief on this. Leo, to me, was an individual who was outgoing. There were so many things that he needed, that he knew, he wanted to share. And so I've heard things will be said later on, I'm sure, and that Leo said, oh yeah, I know that. I bet you we traveled more in the Bay Area while I knew Leo than we did during the entire time that I was employed in the Bay Area. And that was a blessing. So I felt that I really had a connection with him. I was thinking to myself, why is that? Well, I think it's perhaps because my father, who passed away when I was a teenager, is 1 year older than Leo. And so I was thinking that he was like a father in charge. And that's what I thought. So I was really appreciative of that. Now, I believe that the best thing that we can think of as far as Leo's concerned is the fact that his arms were open to anybody and everybody that he met. And yes, he traveled overseas a lot. He can tell you about so many countries. And I appreciated that as well, because I didn't get to do that all that often. And he was of a generous nature, and that's the best thing that I could say to you about him, although I think it's probably apparent to every one of you. He was a person who was really an outgoer. He loved the people that he worked with and people that he met. And if you were just part way open to him, he would be all the way open to you. And so, even though I perhaps am one of the individuals that knew Leo last, it's only been 10 years, that he really had a lot to offer. And if you were available to take in some of that offering, he would be a person who would be blessed. And I think Leo would appreciate that. So I thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit. We know where Leo is. He's with our Father. And we think that one of the things that we need to do is to be conscious of that and to share with one another all the things that Leo's saved for us. So thank you for the opportunity to share something.
Hello, my name is Jeff Hall. I met Leo through the Friendly Visitor Program, and I must tell you, when I signed up for it, and they told me that my guy was going to be 99, I kind of figured it was going to be a short gig. But luckily for all of us, it wasn't. It's an honor for me to have the opportunity to speak about Leo today. Truly, I can say, pardon me, there's never been anyone like him. He certainly lived life to the fullest. I believe the secret to Leo's long life was not just his infinite curiosity, but the fact that he didn't want to miss anything. And I'm sure those of you that know that, knew him well, know that as well. I feel very blessed to have had the opportunity to have dinner or lunch weekly with Leo for the last few years. As you can tell from my accent, I'm not from here. So Leo became pretty much the closest thing I had to family out here. And for the last 5 years or so, the weekly meetings with Leo have been very important to me. I believe Leo lost his license at 99, so when he rode as a passenger with me, it wasn't unusual for Leo to bark out directions as our journey progressed. After all, he knew the area like the back of his hand, mostly. Sometimes his directions, since I kept Siri on the side, knowing he couldn't hear what she was saying and he wouldn't be offended. I was a new guy in town, so I sort of hedged my bets. Sometimes when his directions were different from Siri's, I just went along with it. I mean, what would it hurt? We're just going to go for a ride anyway. Well, one night, we definitely ended up in the wrong part of town. And I discreetly turned to Siri to hear what she said to get us out of here. And when Leo realized how turned around he was, he looks at me. He says, I'm so sorry. Oh boy, I'm so sorry. If I'm honest, Leo was so humble and so apologetic about it, I almost wish Siri had been wrong. It was humbling to know him. He made you feel like you should try a little harder to be a kinder, better person. I don't meet many people like that. Leo was very gentle in describing the afflictions of others. He'd say things like, that fella doesn't have it so good with his legs. As he's sitting there in his wheelchair, he was a very gentle soul. One of my favorite stories occurred a couple of years after I got to know him and figured out what a card he was. Because the price of resident at Atria had gotten so high, it was necessary to move him somewhere else, more affordable. So all of us spent, Dennis, Nancy, and I, spent a couple of weeks looking for an alternative and found a home care program we believed he would enjoy. We were all set to move the next week. Did I mention that Leo was pretty popular at the assisted living facility? If I didn't, I should have. It's important because the people from the facility had decided to throw Leo a giant going-away party. Luckily, a week or so prior to our ultimate move, or the move at the time, a smaller, more affordable room became available at Atria, and Leo was able to stay. When I came to pick him up from the assisted living facility that night, or that evening, I noticed he had an orange juice drink in his hand. When I asked him what he was drinking, he said, orange juice and vodka. The closer I got, the more I realized he was a little drunk. I asked him where he had gotten drunk, and he said at his going away party. I said, Leo, you're not leaving. And true Leo for me said, well, I didn't want to disappoint anyone, so I didn't tell him. True story. It wasn't unusual for Leo and I to break into the assisted living facility after hours because everyone there turned in pretty early. The weekly routine became visits, and COVID, connecting was very tough, but we managed to make it work. The weekly routine became visits to the screen door. He was more anxious than anyone I knew about the restrictions being lifted. His favorite thing to say was, we're gonna have a good time when they let us out of here. We'll have beers and everything. I think I'll use that term the rest of my life. Toward the last few months, things became pretty difficult for Leo. I will always be grateful for Lilia, Camado, Jamal, and Jerry for the great care you gave him. Very humble. Despite the difficulties, Leo could still make me laugh, whether he meant to or not. After an hour-long visit, which included a trip to Safeway for marmalade and McDonald's for more coffee, the visit was nearing an end when Nada entered the scene. Nada came over, and I was sitting on the side there, and Nada's holding Leo's hand. He's looking in her eyes, and she asked him, she says, how are you doing? Is everything okay? Is there anything you need? He said, well, I really, and Leo couldn't hear, by the way. I think you've heard that a couple of times. He could barely hear it. He said, well, I sure wish I had friends that would come visit me. I shouted over, I said, Leo, I'm right here. I'm in the room. Nada heard me because she was smiling, but Leo didn't hear anything. A little later on, she was still there. He then said he just wished that she would sprinkle some yellow dust on him so that his friends could find him. Again, I said, still here, still in the room. I told you Leo could make me laugh. They say smart people never ask a question that they don't already know the answer to. Maybe Leo was like that, or maybe he just liked to talk. Either way, he'd ask a question before you could respond, he'd give you an answer. One evening, we were driving back from the night out, right as we were approaching the entrance to the atria. Leo asked me, by golly, you know what I'm going to do when I get back to the room? I'm going to sit there and spend some time focusing on what a great day I said. What a great day I had. I thought to myself, who says that? Well, for myself, I think I'll spend some time myself focusing on what a great friend I had. Nancy, words can't tell you how much I appreciate what you did for Leo. Thank you very much.
closing story, I get to share another story of Leo. But I have to start with a fun fact that I looked up when I was thinking about Leo. Do you know what the odds are for anyone to live to 105 years old? Well, you know the odds for a man is much lower than that of a woman. And according to my friend Google, the odds for a man to live to 105 is 2 in a million. But those of us who knew Leo knew that he was 1 in a million. When Leo was born in 1917, the US had just entered World War I. The Russian Revolution had just occurred, and a terrible flu pandemic was spreading throughout the world. Sound familiar? But on that farm in western British Columbia where Leo lived as a child, he was far from those global events and closer to the earth, helping his mother. Talked about helping spread the manure on the crops. Leo took in the work ethic taught to him. He worked in many places and he worked hard. And Leo loved people. He maintained friendships through all his years, whether you'd met him a few years ago or 20 years ago, or longer. I met Leo a year ago when he started on hospice care. And when I first met him, he regaled me with stories from the different stages of his life and a lot of recipes. I remember a passionate recitation of his recipe for beef stew. And then last winter, I remember helping him call a couple of his friends, maybe you're here. After the heavy rains, he was concerned they'd had flooding where they lived and he wanted to check in on them. Nancy told me she called over 80 people from Leo's address book for this celebration today to let them know that Leo had died, and we wanted to celebrate him. But of all the people Leo knew, most of all, Leo really, really loved his wife, Celine. And he talked about her, his whole voice and his body posture would change. Her death was perhaps his greatest loss and a sadness that he carried with him throughout a pretty joyful life. Yet through all of that, he stayed connected with others and kept reaching out to probably each of you. There was a point this year in his last months when our visits changed, and it was as his health changed. At a certain point, all Leo wanted was prayer. On my last visit, Leo was gripping my hand so tightly. Died a few days later. He gripped my hand so tightly I could feel my knuckles popping. And he prayed with such fervor. Oh God! Oh my God! We would pray together. I would invite him to remember that God was as close as each beat of his heart, as close as each breath that he was taking. And he would punctuate each prayer with, I'm so glad I met you. I will never forget you. I will see you again. I think Leo was not only talking to me. I think that is Leo's message for each and every person who was in his life. Anyone he cared for. So I invite you to soak in those words without me trying to imitate his accent. To soak in his words, to honor him and remember him. I'm so glad I met you. I will never forget you. And I will see you again. Now we get to see Leo in the slideshow.